Well, hello, everyone, and once again, welcome to your Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. NOCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS, and www.nocd.com, a place that you can go if you're looking for teletherapy. We do teletherapy in the United States, Canada, and the UK, and Australia as well. So please feel free to reach out to us if you're looking for help. And throughout the US, we get on more and more insurance panels all the time. So check us out here at NOCD. We are more than happy to assist in whatever we can do. And we've got support groups that we do for people who are doing NOCD therapy as well. Monique, I think you might even be involved. Do you do?
I do. I run the Managing Scrupulosity group Wednesdays at noon Easter time.
Fun. What a fun word. Scrupulosity. No one likes it, but it is a fun word to say.
It is. I love big words.
Yes. You know what a person who loves big words is called?
I do not actually.
A sesquipedalian.
That is a Googleable.
Yeah.
That is a Google word.
Sesquipedalian is a person who likes big words, just so you know.
Nice. Well, listen, that's a fun fact to keep in the back pocket.
There it is. There is a fun fact, isn't it? Yes. Monique, it's a joy to have you here, and welcome to Black History Month as well too. And so happy to have you here with us tonight and to talk, as we do yearly, on great topics such as this, and to take a look at mental health across the spectrum, and really this month being able to focus on it in the Black African American community, and also to talk about what I think is an important topic too, that not only is there stigma with mental health, but even in minority communities, there might be even more stigma potentially about mental health issues or concerns. So we will definitely get to people's Q&As tonight, but I wanted to start with you just having a little chat about that and what you've seen with members here at NOCD and how you've helped people of color work through obsessive compulsive disorders. And do you see anything that might be different in a minority presentation of OCD versus more of a majority kind of presentation of OCD as well too? So
yeah, for sure. So funny enough, my research about African American community and how it impacts therapy was actually my master's thesis.
Fantastic. Well, we've got the right person here tonight, don't we?
Yeah. So it was the reluctance of African Americans to engage in therapy, and like what was really kind of going on between like the need and why there were people who felt just like really hesitant and what that hesitation was. And so one of the things that I found in my study when I was like really interviewing people was like the stigma around their families and if they felt like their problems were serious enough for treatment. And that was like one of the really big ones. It's just like, well, I'm not going to talk to people just about like work. Like that just doesn't seem serious enough. And when I asked them, like when I went through different diagnoses of what they felt like was important enough to seek treatment for, and anxiety was like the absolute lowest, that it was just like viewed as like something that you do not need help for. Like if you do have anxiety, you're just complaining. And since like OCD is a very largely anxiety-based disorder, right? For in that community, it just seems like you aren't being strong enough, or you're not praying hard enough, or you're not doing the things in your life that you should be to make you feel more calm or more secure. And for a lot of people, that is really what it is. It's just like, okay, this isn't serious enough. This just isn't good enough, right? Or valid enough to seek treatment for. And so that has been some of the things that I've really noticed when I've talked to people about what I do and when I talk to people about therapy. Either people are like very much like pro, like people should go to therapy, Black people should go to therapy, or it's just like, you don't need that. It'll be fine. Like talk to your pastor, talk to Jesus, and like, and you'll make it through. And so that's kind of some of the hesitations that I have really noticed kind of coming out in our community about why they don't seek out treatment.
Yeah, it's I remember working with an Asian patient years and years ago, and she said she went home to Japan and her family at dinner sat her down and said, okay, show us therapy, as if it was just, we don't know what this is, so show us therapy, just let us see it, right? And I even remember, I still have family in Ireland, and I remember being in Ireland one time, after a few drinks down, because that's how unfortunately in Ireland, there's a lot of therapy through that way. But even my relatives in Ireland said, why do you have to have so many therapists in your country? We don't understand, right? What's going on? So even within countries, there's so many levels of this. So I'm so excited to talk to you, and I'd love to hear a little bit about, more on that concept of a thesis, and really specifically looking at, what's been your experience here with NOCD and working with minority clients and all those things too.
Yeah, for sure. So the minority clients I've had here, I've had some African-American clients, not as many African-American clients as I've had with other demographics. And so some of the things that I have really noticed with my African-American clients is they feel a bigger pressure to make sure that this is almost like, is this worth it for you, Monique? And I'm like, girl, like,
okay,
this is for you. Like, this is yours. Like, but really wanting to almost like justify why they are coming into treatment and what that looks like. And I'm very, very intentional about making sure that they understand, like, this is your time. Like, this is your time to talk about whatever it is that is a concern for you, right? Like, there doesn't need to be a justification for why you need help or for why you are seeking help. And so that, I would say, has been one of the consistent themes I have noticed with some of my African-American clients. Though one of the things that has been really fun is like bringing culture into treatment. A lot of the African-American clients want therapists who are willing to talk about culture, right? And willing to really take a look at it, because very often even in like the therapy spaces is right, open and liberal and things as we can be, like the colorblind aspect of things has sometimes like soured people's opinion of it, and being able to like really talk about difficult experiences that have maybe sparked anxiety concerns. So being scared about social pressures or going into predominantly white spaces, because I am licensed in Washington, which is like a predominantly white state.
Yep.
And so like being able to talk about things that are very particular to like being a Black person has been like really, really impactful. And they show a lot of appreciation, just not only to have a Black face as their therapist, but to be able to talk about it from a really open and honest perspective. Funny enough, I've actually had a lot of really good interactions with people who are not Black about racial concerns as well, of like, I would like to be better at this. I would like to talk about this, like working towards feeling more comfortable doing things related to race as well.
I was interesting working with white members over the last 2 years, especially with the Black Lives Matters movement, who were afraid, and their OCD picked up on, how can I not be racist, right? And what if I'm not doing enough to not be racist, which then became compulsions for people to do. And then COVID's there. So I remember a very fascinating conversation. I want to go out and march, but what if I give everyone COVID? And there's these pull between these two things that they have going on. And the ability to make a decision around that was just overwhelming in that kind of sensation.
Yeah, especially like the idea of getting canceled has been like a huge, huge thing. Like, am I going to say the right thing? Like, I need to have not only just like say the right things, but I need to have the right opinions about these things. Even if I'm not saying them to anybody, even if, right, I just need to think correctly. So that way I feel comfortable with like who I am and that I'm not racist. And like having those conversations has been like really enlightening. I'm very open to talking about race. I think it's a fascinating topic and concept. And so like for me, especially like with the whole like challenging uncertainty and doing those things, I'm always like, you might be racist. Let's see. Let's figure it out. You're like, Monique, don't do this to me. I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. I got questions first. So
nice. We all hold certain stereotypes about things. It's a natural experience. And it's, OCD wants to say how bad and awful and horrible you are. And I think we're just teaching people how to learn about recognizing them, being like, I got to move past that. Right. I can recognize that I might hold something, but it doesn't mean that I have to go with it. Right. And how difficult that is for people too, who want to say, no, I want to never think this ever again. Well, boy, if if anyone comes up with a way to do that, please let Monique and I know. We'll write a book together. We'll make millions of dollars if
Sure
anyone
will.
can ever come up with a way to not think about something. But no
Yeah.
one's really figured that out yet. So that's not our goal in therapy, right? I'd like your opinion on one thing too. One
Yeah.
of the things that I love about behavioral based therapies like exposure and response prevention is that I believe it's a really culturally competent type of therapy, because we are not trying to change anybody. We're trying to help people live within whatever environment or culture they find themselves in to the best of their ability. And that's what I've always appreciated working with people too, and bringing culture into the experience. You may have a different religion. You were talking about scrupulosity, religious belief than I'm not trying to convince you of my belief or lack of belief or whatever it is. I'm trying to figure out how can I help you live within your belief to the best of your ability without OCD interfering with it.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I've noticed about ERP is I agree, right? Like as long as the therapist is working within that framework of like,
Yes.
okay, where do you want to get to? And like,
Yes.
let's start working towards that.
Yes.
I think the potential bias of ERP is not, and again, right? Like a lot of bias comes from like the lack of knowledge where your bias is, right?
Yes.
And that's a huge topic. That's a whole nother
we do a
right,
show on
that's
that if
another
we wanted
webinar
to.
in
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of the bias will come from not knowing good questions to ask to dig deeper into specific topics. So if I was to say, like, oh, well, I'm concerned about my religion and if I should go to church, if I shouldn't go to church. Well, African Americans are actually like the highest religious population in the United States of America, right? I think last I checked was my master's thesis. So 85% of African Americans identify as religious. And so being able to recognize, okay, so there are certain customs around their religion to know, like food customs around the religion, like adults, your grandparents, all of these things about how to do these right. And so making sure, I think always to ask good questions is where you really get to make sure that like those unbiased opinions do come out in treatment, and we're knowing where we want to go with ERP, what things we may need to be addressing. Because like one ERP that people might not think of when it comes to church is like, tell your grandma that you're not going to church. like tell your grandma that you're not going to church anymore. Because if I had to tell that to my grandma, I'd be like, I was like, I'm just gonna have to see you next week because we're gonna try that again.
Yeah, we're gonna try that again.
Those things are just culturally like you have to know sometimes, or like to ask for sure.
Yeah.
Have you noticed like in your treatment that sometimes it's like harder for you to come up with like exposures for different cultures?
I try to be very open and honest when I don't know something and ask the questions about what do you see people without these concerns you're bringing to me do within your culture to try to get an idea. And then I think it's very important outside of sessions to research, right? So if I have a friend, a family member, someone who might be of a similar ilk, be it by whatever cultural aspect it is, be it religion, be it race. I'm fortunate to have Black and Chinese people in my family. I have gay people. I can call lots of just family members. All right, I got a question for you. I even have a cousin who's a priest. So if I'm working with someone who's Catholic, I can call him and say, is this a sin or how does this come? And he can tell me from the official kind of Catholic point of view. So I think it's important for us as therapists to have humility to say, we don't have all the answers, right?
Yeah.
And it's important for us to try to find as many of them as we can to understand the members that we're working with here, especially because not only is it ethical, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I noticed for me, like inclines to like what you brought up about being Catholic. I have a member who's Catholic. My mother was raised Catholic, and I have friends who are Catholic, and I've been to different ceremonies and things, but there's like the intricacies that you don't know from just being raised in it, right? Like Catholic guilt and all the other things that kind of come along with it. And so just I was like, can you actually teach me a little bit about this, like about what you've went through or about like how that process goes? Because one of my members was talking a lot about confession, and she was saying, I was like, can we back up just a minute? And like, can you teach me like how does the traditional confessional go? Like, what do you do ahead? And she's like, oh yeah, so here's these things, you have to do this. There's like the prayer beads. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, let me write this down. This is great to know, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so like just being open to saying like, hey, can you teach me a little bit about this just really quick, has been like very appreciated, in my opinion, from members. Now you don't want to say like, okay, well, give me the whole history of the Catholic Church, but a specific question about like this thing, I'm not necessarily complete, I don't understand what's going on, can you teach me? And a lot of people are much more open to saying like, I would love for you to understand this better, so that way we can have a better conversation about it.
Yeah. I love it. Well, why don't we intersperse a few Q&As here, because we've got some people throwing some things in, and let's take a look and see what people think. So
I do have one thing that I love to give my clients. So I'll tell everybody,
please.
If you have not seen the play Avenue Q, anytime I have a client who is concerned about being racist, there's a song, and it's a play, but it's all puppets.
Oh yeah. Right. Yeah.
So they have a song called "Everyone's a Little Bit Racist," and I tend to send that to all of my members who are concerned about being racist. I'm like, everybody's a little bit racist.
Everyone's a little
fantastic song.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm gonna go listen to that right after this. Actually, yes. I'm going on YouTube after this to listen to that.
For sure. Yeah.
All right.
Let's get some questions.
Yeah. Your Majesty says, what is the difference between OCD fixation on medications, like having benzos prescribed, and taking them accordingly? Well, I mean, here, let's talk about benzos just in general. One of the concerns around benzodiazepines, of course, is that taking a benzodiazepine before or after exposure or response prevention could really interfere with the response prevention piece, because the whole goal of ERP is to expose you to something that's uncomfortable so that your anxiety will raise, or your guilt or shame or discomfort or disgust or whatever it is that might come about. And then to teach you how to live with that experience without doing a compulsion. And if it's hard to bring that up because you've taken a benzodiazepine, or right after it's up, you say, I can't handle it, and you take a benzodiazepine, you're going for safety behaviors because you're learning the quick fixes on something instead of allowing for that habituation kind of experience, which is the decrease in anxiety or discomfort or whatever over the passage of time. And now, there could, of course, be people who think, well, I can't handle this without medication, right? And then wonder, are they being fixated on medication or something of that nature? But I think it behooves us as therapists, and Monique, love your opinion on this, to help convince people that you can handle things without needing the immediate fix benzodiazepine. And our job is to slowly and gradually build up the tolerance with you to be able to learn that you can handle that.
Yeah, completely agree. Right. One of the things that I've noticed for members when I've had this conversation is I'm like, we want to make sure that you are going through this and you can really feel and learn how your body is reacting to this, like, and just start to learn more about yourself. One of the things that I really try to, like, I guess, convey to my members is like, trust your body. And like, when we take those benzos and when we have those, like you said, right, those immediate changes to that, like, we don't really necessarily able to kind of one-on-one connect with our own bodies and our own reactions to things in like authentic ways. And that has been a really helpful way for some of my members to kind of understand what I mean when I say like, okay, well, we want to trust your body, but if we can't have a full connection with that, then we won't be able to really like feel that from an authentic space. Yeah.
I think we have to recognize too, bodies are noisy, right? They're
All
always
the time.
sending signals. There's an itch over here. There's an ache or pain over there. I could start talking to you, Monique, about lice, and you'd probably start scratching your head within a minute. Just
Black people don't get lice, actually. We are
okay.
Like, so here's a cultural experience, you guys. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So funny enough, like that's not even a joke. Like Black people really don't get lice. I mean, you can, but like it is very hard for Black people to get lice because our hair, like, traditionally you want more oils and things in your hair, and so it's harder for lice to like dig in and like actually. So yeah, so like nobody I've ever known who's Black has ever gotten lice. I've never gotten Even when we had people in our school, like all the black people, like
you had no worry about that. Note came home and your mom and dad were, yeah, whatever.
yeah, like they were like, oh yeah, so it was a girl in our class, and it was like, yep, she got it, but she was like the only white person in our class. Like, sorry, Whitney. We'll see you. We'll see you in 5 days.
We love you, Whitney. We love you. We give it. Yeah.
So another little Black History Month tidbit.
Hey, we want them all, so throw them in as you can, please. Natural B says, how do you tell the difference between sexual orientation OCD and your orientation genuinely changing? You want to jump on that, or I'm happy to, whatever you
want. So like, because I tend to lean towards uncertainty and not reassure my clients, my first question is always like, are you ready to have sex with a lady or with a guy? Mm-hmm. And they're like, I don't know. And I was like, that's how we determine our sexual orientation. I was like, are we ready? Are we wanting to? Is this something that we are interested in? And they're just like, I'm just worried about it.
There you go.
And I was like, there it is. Right? Like, are you worried about this happening, or do you want this to happen? And that is a huge, huge indicator of if our orientation is actually changing. And don't get me wrong, right? Sexual orientation changes all throughout our life, right? You can be completely, right, Kinsey 6 gay at some point, and then swing towards bi and swing back, right? And that is perfectly okay, right? But it's about your wants and your desires. Like, if you have the actual want to do this, then yes, your orientation is changing. And I suggest that you, right, do some research, see how you're feeling about it, see if you feel comfortable, and then make that plunge. But if not, and you're just worried or concerned about this, then I would say that's very likely OCD.
And then let's recognize where OCD is going to come in that too. Well, what if I don't know that I want to, right? Mm-hmm. Or what if I think I want to, but I don't, or anything too. So first of all, natural B, I would say there's no clear-cut answer to give you to your question, right? That I can't tell you anything that will satisfy you to the nth degree to be able to, like, okay, now I know what the difference is between sexual orientation, OCD, and if I'm actually changing. Now, I recognize that may be disturbing to hear right off the bat, that you don't like hearing that you want 100% answer. But OCD always wants 100% answer and guarantee, which none of us can ever. Yeah, we can't give that to anybody, right? I mean, Monique, one of the things I say in the webinar all the time is I have no guarantee that at some point in time I won't leave this webinar, go across the street and throw a Molotov cocktail at my neighbor Dave's house, then take a poop in a bag in the middle of the street, light it on fire, put it in front of my neighbor Josh's house, ring the doorbell, he'll come out, stomp on it, and get a poopy, flamey bag on the shoe, shoot 3 geese on the way back into my house, and then come back in and continue the webinar. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, right? It could. It's a possibility. Now, Natural B, you're kind of wanting to know, how can I guarantee that this is OCD, which is what I'm going to making an assumption here, because usually when anybody asks that question, it's what if it's actually true that my orientation is changing and it's not OCD? So I can't give you a 100% definite answer on anything like that. But what I can help somebody to do is to recognize that any kind of intrusive thoughts that they might have about these things aren't things that you necessarily have to pay all that much attention to, right? And I think, Monique, as you had said too, if you're finding that you're experiencing certain types of desires, there's always research, and there's ways to interview people and ask questions and everything like that. It's not like tomorrow you're going to wake up and be something different than you are today. And I haven't seen it really happening. There's a process on this entire thing. Well, how do I know if the process is the process or if it's sexual orientation OCD? Again, right? When I see people and they're kind of going along what you said, Monique, around this, but what if, mm-hmm. I'm always leaning on the OCD, but what if I want to and I don't know that I want to, right? There's where I'm at. And when it gets to the point of I'm going to test this out or something of that nature, then it's an entirely different conversation than it is. But what if I were something? So
my members always hate it if they have sexual, and this is normally when I have a good relationship. It was like, what if I want to have sex with a lady? I was like, well, let's do it. I was like, let's go. I was like, let me know how it goes. I was like, when you find somebody, you let me know, and I was like, we'll vet her together if we want to. And she was like, but I'm not ready. I was like, okay, then great. Mm-hmm. Right. Then it sounds like we're still straight until we're ready. And she's like, Monique, don't do this. And I'm like, we'll see, you know?
But after a while, people get to be able to sit with that and recognize that even this conversation didn't change who I am or something, which is always the fear that how can I know 100% for sure what I am? None of us do.
Nobody does.
I have no guarantee that I won't run someone over with my car tomorrow, right? Should I not drive tomorrow just in case? Or
yeah, we're gonna run over Dave.
We might run over Dave. Who knows? It could happen. Right? A reminder to everyone, you're listening to the NOCD webinar. NOCD brought to you by the letter N and the letter O and the letter C and the letter D. Just going back to our Sesame Street days there, but we are happy to have you here. Oh, there we go. You got your silent. Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you, Monique. If you're looking for teletherapy across the US or the UK or Australia or in Canada, check us out at nocd.com and download our app on Google Play or iOS as well too. Steve says, is association OCD a thing? Like if I see or hear this, but don't do this, something bad will happen. Is it a thing? Well, yeah. Is it true or real? I would say no. I mean, I could look right now and say, Monique, if I look at you again, my head will explode. That doesn't matter that just because I thought something like that it's actually going to occur or not. Now, OCD sure does love a good association though, right? OCD loves to find and make associations to anything. You've probably seen some interesting ones, I'm sure. So.
Oh yeah, look, I've lived through interesting ones because after I started working here, I started noticing myself doing the same thing. And I was like, nope, no. Because I was like, well, you have to do this thing. And I was like, no brain. We do not have to do this thing. We want to be safe and that is okay. I was like, but we don't have to do this to be safe. Right. But some of the really interesting ones that I have seen, one of my members, they had a concern about the devil. And so if they saw anything red, right, like then they had to pray. Yeah. And it was like, if they don't pray, then the devil's going to come for them.
Yeah. And so your nails could have been very triggering to someone.
Very, right? Like, and so sometimes we create associations in our mind that aren't there, right? And we're making these little triggers. If I do have a member who does a lot of associations, I don't know if you've ever seen It's Sunny in Philadelphia, but when he has like all the strings and he's like this, and I'm like, what happens when we make associations, right? Like we create all of these strings. We have tied all of these things together, but that also means that we can untie these associations. We can like be the ones to say, well, I'm going to test it out. I'm just going to test and see what happens. And that is one of the things that has been really helpful for members of just like, oh, let's just be a scientist today. Let's see what happens. Let's give it a try. And if things go great, we'll try again. And if something bad happens, we'll still try again.
Yeah, no, I use the same. I love the let's become a scientist, right? It's live in the world as a scientist does, of testing things out. If you do something and you like the result, we'll continue to do it. If you do something you don't like the result, we'll find something else to do then. But we're always going to be investigating and checking and things like that. But we're also going to accept an answer. And that's the difference between OCD and science. Yeah. OCD and science both want investigation, but OCD doesn't accept an answer because OCD always says, well, what science,
even if you get the answer you were looking for, OCD will still not accept it.
Right. Science is open to any answer. Right. And says, okay, well, there's our answer. That's fine. OCD is so 99 doctors say you're fine. One says, well, maybe there's something. That's the only one that OCD pays attention to.
Yeah.
Bruce says, please provide tips for handling sneaky OCD rituals, small ones throughout the day. Well,
so one of the ones that I really love is the chicken dance. Everybody knows the chicken dance. And so one of the fun things that I did with my member, I was just like, for this particular ritual, I was like, do the chicken dance. So that way you are starting to just recognize when you're doing it. Right. So it was kind of like an awareness training. I was like, let's just do it for fun for this day. I was like, anytime you notice yourself doing it, and then check and see what's going on around this ritual, like what's happening before, what's happening after, because a lot of times the sneaky rituals are because we are not very aware of like what our habits are and what's going on in those moments. And so when we make those moments just a little bit bigger in the day, it helps us pay attention to what actually is like happening, and being able to be a lot more aware of that ahead of time is what helps us like, okay, I recognize maybe this ritual happens after I watch Criminal Minds every day. Okay, well, maybe Criminal Minds is actually a trigger and I need to pay attention to this. And so that's been one of the things that I have got my members to do, is just like making, when you do notice those sneaky rituals, make it just a little bit bigger, right? So that way you can kind of pay attention to what's happening in those moments.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you could do is really make a list of what those sneaky rituals are and then program purposeful exposures to those things throughout the day. So if every time I see the color red, I do say a prayer, you could wear a red shirt then for that day purposely, so that you're always being surrounded by red, and you're going to get to a point of exhaustion that you won't be able to do a prayer all day long. You're going to have to do your job and everything, and you'll get through the end of the day and realize there were points where I saw my shirt and I didn't say a prayer, and wow, look at that. Nothing has ever happened.
Yeah.
So awesome. Muhammad says, hey, it's his birthday.
Happy birthday.
Wonderful. He's got a couple of things here, so I'm going to read this down. I'm trying to do response prevention, but now my theme is changing to, like, at work, for example, if I say something or someone you think of the whole situation, like, what I said, they said, did I said anything wrong, or did they disrespect me? All kinds of thoughts. Then I force myself to think that you're okay and you're done, and this is not doing it. Okay. A little confusing on that, but we may have a language issue here just a slight bit. Sometimes, please help, have OCD since childhood. Seems like I have all the OCD themes, depends on situations, then change to something else. Okay. So
the whack-a-mole, or at least that's what I call it.
It looks like we got a little OCD whack-a-mole. And let me try to interpret this a little bit better. So what I said, they said, I did, if I did anything wrong, or did they disrespect me at all, then I have to force myself to think that I'm okay and that I'm not doing that thing. Okay, so it kind of looks like what we're saying here is, what if somebody thinks something about me that I don't think about myself, or has something negative about me, and do I have to undo it? It kind of seems like. And then, like you said, the OCD whack-a-mole experience as well too. So I would say, no, Mohammed, you don't have to undo anything. Monique, I'm going to think something about you right now, and tell me if you know what it is.
It's that my hair looks awesome, for sure. That has to be it.
I mean, your hair is lovely and doesn't get lice, I've learned as well. But that is not what I was thinking about you, by the way. So you don't know, and I'm not going to tell you. So now you don't know if I was thinking something positive or neutral or negative about you. How will that interfere with the rest of the webinar tonight?
It will not. As I tend to tell my members, right, it is not our job or our concern to know what other people think about us, or even to change what other people think about us, right? That is their business, and that is not our business.
I love it. I love it. And that can be so hard for people to accept, right?
Very. The hardest ones, honestly. Personal responsibility is a huge piece, I think, of like OCD, and being able to recognize some things we don't have to take on, and accepting that as like it's really hard, because it's like, but I see it. I see that it's happening. I've heard this, and like being able to just accept that even though we've heard it, right? Even though we've seen it, that doesn't always mean that this is something that we have to deal with. Very similar to all of our other, right, rituals and obsessions and compulsions. Just because, right, we have seen the color red doesn't mean we have to pray, right? Just because we have been triggered doesn't mean we have to complete the compulsion.
OCD would 100% disagree with you.
All the time.
OCD
all the time. Like, Monique, don't say that. That's not true.
Yeah. And I think, as therapists, we're trying to give people a job, and the job is to do the opposite of what OCD wants them to do.
Yeah. And I think also to the whack-a-mole experience, I'll kind of explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that OCD is very good at is being a shapeshifter, right? It will change and move and completely redevelop itself in your life, because one thing people have noticed, like, just like over time, they'll say like, oh, well, when I was younger, I really used to have a concern about contamination, but that's kind of went away. And now I'm really worried about like sexual orientation, or I'm really worried about errors or scrupulosity. And one of the things I tell my members is I say, like, until we get comfortable with accepting uncertainty, until we get comfortable with accepting that we will not have the right answers, that we cannot come up with perfect solutions, I was like, our OCD will continue to change, because it's not the specific thing, right? It's not the specific subtype. It is not any of those things. It's the way that we are thinking about them. It's the way that we are processing these things. It's the way that we are convincing ourselves that, like, if we continue to search, if we continue to look for a better or new or more sophisticated answer, that will somehow be the bright light in the sky that solves everything. But what it really just does is, like, it makes us play whack-a-mole with different OCD compulsions and subtypes.
I know you know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you because I think our lovely audience members could benefit from it. Can you ever satisfy OCD?
Never. No. It'll ask you for more. It's like that, like, yeah, it's like kids. Like, if you take your kids to the amusement park, they will be sad when you leave. You could have been there all day, all 8 hours, 8 whole hours, and they'll still be cry on the way. You're like, we were here all. Won't matter. It wants more. I want more fun.
Dave says, I don't know if I have OCD, but for a while now, I've been consumed by thoughts of something bad happening or something going wrong, worrying about it excessively and feeling the need to do something about it. This has really impacted my life and caused me a lot of distress. Is this a form of OCD? Well, Dave, my first suggestion is it's sounding like it. So I would suggest reach out to us at NOCD, or if you have other therapists that you know are reputable in your area that do good exposure and response prevention therapy, it would behoove you to get a good diagnostic evaluation with somebody who could really take a look at this and see what the impact of your life is, and is this meeting to the level of an obsession, and are these things you're doing meeting to the level of compulsions, and then start to get some treatment on it right now so that you don't have to sit with constantly worrying about something bad going wrong and feeling the need to do something about it, because that sure sounds like a compulsion to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good luck, Dave. Reach out to us at nocd.com and let us help you, or also check out the International OCD Foundation as well for great referrals as well if you're looking for something. CO says, how to gradually do ERP when the theme is about certain image that appears when saying a specific word. All right. Well, CO, first of all, what you might do is take that image and cartoonify it, and maybe just have a cartoony version of the word and kind of a blurred, pixelated version of what that thing is that appears when you hear the word, and then bring it more into focus gradually over time until you're able to look at that image and not be bothered by it. And then I would go to the word and do similar things, maybe hear words that are similar sounding words, and maybe read the word but in a very blurry kind of state first, and then eventually be able to have someone just put the word on a loop tape and listen to it over and over again until maybe that thing pops in your head, but you realize, even though that thing's in my head, it doesn't have to interfere with my day whatsoever, and I can just go live my life. Yep. Rodrigo says, can you give some tips on how to deal with metaphysical OCD? I have a problem of thinking if someone touches my belongings, and if that person is evil or bad, I need to cleanse my belongings with water to get rid of the intrusive thoughts and uncurse your objects. I lived in a very religious family. They are Catholics, and even if a person was of another religion, they are considered evil. Thanks. I also started this problem when I was 12 after I watched The Exorcist, which was a very traumatic movie for me. Monique, you do run one of our scrupulosity groups. I'm gonna hand that one over to you first to start with.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Rodrigo, I'm sorry. Listen, I tell people all the time, I am a card-carrying member of Weenie Hut Jr. And so, like, I am so sorry to hear that The Exorcist was a traumatic movie for you, because I can only imagine. So when it comes to scrupulosity, particularly when it comes to religious scrupulosity, a couple of the things that I really recommend for my members is like taking this slow, because religion plays a huge part of our lives and a huge part of the way that we identify with our identities and just like moving through the world and how we really connect with other people. So one of the things that you can start trying is like, if there's something that you feel like you need to cleanse, give it to someone who you like really love and trust, who you still may feel like maybe they're of a different religion, right? Like, so let's try with people that we trust to actually touch something that is difficult, right? Then we can try.
Let me just point, when you're saying give it to them, not to take it away from you, but
Right.
to actually use as ERP. I just don't want anyone to confuse that.
Yeah, no, we're not just like giving away all of our belongings. Yes, thank
Take
you.
this.
Right? Like, I would say, like, okay, Patrick, can you just touch this water bottle for me?
Of course.
So that way
Hold
I
on.
can.
There you go. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Perfect, right? And then we will sit this in our room, right? And we'll look at it. And we won't try to cleanse this belonging. This is just something. And then we start to become comfortable with this idea and just seeing how life goes now that we have this cleansed belonging, right? And you can start with things that are not very important to you, right? So let's start with a candle, then we can move up to a pen and then lip gloss, and then you want to start maybe getting to things that are closer to home, right? A water bottle, which I use all the time, our cell phone, our keys, our wallet, right? Especially if you're starting to notice that, like, depending on the item, your that it's higher on your hierarchy depending on how important the item is to you. So that is one of the things that I would definitely say. I think he also said that, yeah, you need to cleanse the items with water. This would be just a little bit harder. But I would say just toss out some holy water. Just toss it down on the ground and see how you feel, right? Like, some of the things that can be difficult in religious circles is like the wasting of holy things, and being able to say, like, all of these things, though we are cleansing, though this has purpose, we don't always have to use it this way. There is nothing bad that will happen to me if I do this. One of the things that was really hard for me when I started here, and Patrick is actually the one who did this hard thing for me, was like, you have to say, I want God to strike somebody down, or something like that. And I was just like, oh my God, no. I was like, don't make me say it. And then I did, right? And nothing happened, right? Yeah. And so the harder it gets, right, the more you start to recognize that, like, it really won't have as too much effect.
Yeah, and so I'll throw in on that, because I wouldn't normally make that as an exposure for people unless that was the fear that they have. What if I think I want God to strike someone down? Or what if I might have said that and I don't know it, right? So then we could say, all right, I don't create new things for people. And I think that this is an important lesson for everybody doing ERP. We're not going to create something for you to do that isn't bothering you. We're not going to just make up random things, say, well, let's do this and let's do this and let's do that. It's not about getting anybody to do something that's blasphemous or anything of that nature. It's about getting people to sit with the discomfort that they have about the things that are already going on in their head, and learn that they can handle them without doing a ritual to undo them, or do a prayer. Because if you're doing a prayer in these situations, it's not really a prayer. A prayer is communing with your higher power. But if you're doing a prayer because you had this obsession and you think that if you don't, something bad's going to happen, that's actually a compulsion and not really a prayer to any kind of higher power. Now, in terms of the water, I think in this situation, there's one other way to look at it. I don't know if it's holy water or not. I can't tell from what it is. But
normally, if you cleanse it, it would be, or at least I should say, in my religion, if you cleanse something with water, it tends to be holy water in my family.
Because he put clean parentheses cleanse, so it's hard to tell, right? So if you have to clean something with water, what if you just allowed it to be there, right, without putting any water on it, right? That's what we would want to do. We would want someone to touch something and not do that compulsion of any kind of cleaning whatsoever. Now, again, there's different ways of looking at things. Like, I remember I was doing a discussion with my cousin, who's, again, a priest. And I was in the middle of a webinar on scrupulosity. And there was a panel of us. And somebody brought up, would you have somebody who's Catholic do a Ouija board? And I was like, Hold on. I'm texting Jim. I said, would that be a sin? And he said, yes, that's a sin in the Catholic religion to be. I was like, okay, well, guess what? I would never then ask a Catholic to do a Ouija board, because that would be in their religion considered a sin. But I would be willing to do something along the lines of even the image of it or discussing it if it's an intrusive thought for someone who's Catholic of, what if I want to do a Ouija board, right?
Right.
Right. So now I can still do ERP within someone's faith system that is respecting of their faith system, that isn't asking them to do something that their faith doesn't want them to do, but is also still an ERP exercise, because there's nothing wrong with seeing a Ouija board or talking about it or something like that, and being able to be around, like if it's Halloween and knowing that store might even, that toy store might have one in there. Well, it doesn't mean that I have to avoid going in the toy store, and I could even walk down the aisle where it is, but I don't have to buy it. I don't have to do anything with it. I could just allow it to be there and know that I can be comfortable in my own thoughts and opinions and faith without having to give into what my OCD is telling me about those kinds of experiences as well, too.
As we make your hierarchy, we very much work on the things that are bothering you. We want this to feel very accurate to your struggles. We want this to feel very personal. Like, one of the things that I really try to do with my members when we're making obsessions, and like, does this feel good, or does something about this obsession feel off? And often once we have created them, they're like, it's close. And so like, okay, great, right? Let's work on it until it feels like something that is really accurate to what's going on for you. And so your NOCD therapist is really going to try to make sure that like the things that you guys work on are the things that very much are the concerns for your own life. It's very individualized.
Dave says, I've struggled with worrying about the health and well-being of others being affected by me and feeling obligated to do something about it to prevent something bad from happening. Is this a form of OCD? The intentions aspect, the message from certain books that are out there that somehow I could do something that could affect other people, right? Now, of course, there's actual events that we could do that affect other people. We could hit someone with our car, but OCD would even look at thinking about that might be as bad as doing it. We call that thought action fusion in OCD, and the notion that thinking something is just as bad as doing it. So am I a bad person even for a thought? That might have as well too. So Dave, the goal of sitting with this idea that worrying, let's pick apart what you say. In fact, I'm going to just pull it up here so we can all see it. I've struggled with worrying about, well, that's one of our trigger words that we're going to pay attention to right there, right? You're worrying about the health and well-being of others being affected by me. What a existentially kind of way that somehow I am affecting the health and well-being of others. Could that be if I'm a smoker and I exhale smoke and then someone else breathes it in and now they get cancer from me? Is that a way? What if I fart really bad and someone hates the smell of it and it's disgusting? Who knows the different ways that this could happen. And I'm obligated to do something about it to prevent something bad from happening to other people. Then we could go to, I drive a car and it's a gas car and it creates fumes, which then could contribute to global warming, which then could contribute to an ice cap melting, which then could flood the lakes and the rivers and the ocean, which could then cause an island nation that's at sea level to go underground. And it's my fault that these people have lost their home because I've driven a car. Right? OCD
There's no
won't
end to
stop. The OCD won't stop. Yeah, exactly.
It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and like more things become your fault, more things get under your umbrella, and very much like you said, right? You can layer more and more things on top of it to just, OCD will find ways for things to be your concern or your fault.
I want everyone to remember this. Nothing is ridiculous to OCD.
Yes, 1,000%. Yes, absolutely nothing.
Everything's on the table.
Right?
Wait, that could be related to that, which could cause that, which might be related to that, which could push this to that. OCD is the butterfly effect, right?
Yes, very much. Like, it does not have to. I tell people all the time, I was like, trust me, There is nothing that you have thought that has OCD has not tried to poke at. Like all the things. I told my fiance the other day, I was like, you have to delete my Google search history. I was like, because I was like, I was like, all the crazy things that OCD has taken us down that rabbit hole. I don't need the world to know all the things I've had to look at.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Absolutely. Toothpaste asks how to get over real event OCD and something that happened, the need to confess. I'd like your opinion on this. I answered this question last week, and I was going to skip over because we went over it, and I didn't want to do it from a reassurance point of view, but I'm interested in another therapist's take on it before we move on. So,
yeah. So, what I tell people when you have the need to confess is only confess if they come a knocking. If they don't come a knocking, it sounds like we're keeping it to ourselves. Now, in extreme cases, right, when like you have hurt a friend and you feel like this is a resolution that you guys need to have for right some serious concern, right? Then there are times when we do need to have serious conversations to heal relationships. But if you are confessing for your own feelings and you just want to feel better and not to heal a relationship, unless they come a knocking, keep it to yourself.
Yeah. I like it. I've often said this too. Confession is for the person confessing when it's OCD and not for the person hearing the confession.
Yes. Yep. Ding, ding, ding. That's it.
And how many couples I've worked with over the course of my career who the spouse who doesn't have OCD says, I don't want to hear this. Right? I don't. And then, well, now I have to confess to you because now you're mad at me, and I'm sorry. And all these, and it's just like the confession is empty. The apology is empty in OCD. It doesn't count. It's not real. I had someone standing at my door for an hour and a half once back at the hospital because they had said to me, I'm sorry. And I said to them, I don't accept your apology, because the day before we had agreed that I wasn't going to accept any more apologies because the apologies were a compulsion for this person. They weren't real apologies. They were a compulsion. And so something happened and it was tiny. Oh, he asked me a question and then said, I'm sorry I asked that question. I said, well, I don't accept the apology. And now for an hour and a half, I'm being begged, please accept the apology, please. And I said, no, I'm not going to give in anymore. We agreed yesterday that I'm not giving in to this. And the apology / confession go hand in hand with each other. And I'm just not giving into this anymore. We're not playing this game. We are not doing this.
And that's one of the things that I really try to impress upon, especially my married couples, is I was like, that's one of the first ones. I was like, let's cut that down as much as we can, right? Because it hurts your partner for you to continue. Like, well, I thought about this person. I did this. I was like, like you can hurt your partner when you are trying to help yourself. I was like, right? Like these selfish things still hurt other people. And so we have to really recognize, like, just because it makes us feel better doesn't mean it's the right move to make.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite questions, actually, that's coming here. So I'm excited to talk about this one. My harm OCD gets triggered when hearing about people who've done violent crimes. And I think, what if I become like them? And it makes me doubt whether or not this is OCD or me.
Yeah. Right. Just coming through, stabbing folks. So one of the things that I have noticed, right, when it comes to like harm OCD and people who are concerned, right, that they will eventually be like killers and things like that. And I was like, well, what if you're like Dexter and you're a good murderer and you like murder for good reasons?
Yeah.
They're like,
you're a good witch.
Yeah, right? Like you murder. What if you murder for good, right? And you're just, you're a nice psychopath. And they're just like, but I don't want to be a psychopath. And I'm like, well, great.
You don't have to be. Right?
Yeah. I was like, so we're going to just keep the streak alive, it sounds like. And they're just like,
Monique, since you've joined NOCD,
yeah,
have you found what I have found, that now that I've talked to people about all these different ways that they could harm people, that I can't stop thinking about harming people that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, if you and I were standing on a staircase, I'd think about throwing you down the stairs, because I've treated so many people who are afraid of what if I were to throw people down the stairs.
No, so mine actually, so I've had similar, but mine is not the harm.
Okay.
Mine tends to be like, if like I have to do a thing or
Gotcha.
something bad is gonna happen.
There you go. Okay, cool.
Somebody.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah, for sure.
It hits different people in different ways. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
So, yeah.
Like mine is always like, oh, you gotta touch the thing, or you gotta open the book, or you gotta do whatever. But yeah, mine hasn't been the harm. But like when I first started working here, I went to supervision. I was like, hey, you guys, anybody else feeling these like feeling the compulsion? Just like, what if I did? And you're like, no, don't do that.
I mean, after telling someone to push me into a train for 3 hours with me standing a foot from a track and their hand on my shoulder, I can't get on a train platform now without considering throwing everybody I see onto the track, right?
You know what? No, so after I did a exposure with somebody about like pushing people in front of a train, and then I went to New York, and like it kind of played my mind. I was like, oh. So yeah, I do remember that has happened before.
So I say all this civilly to say to you that everyone in the world has violent, intrusive thoughts, and they don't make people do violent crimes. Otherwise, all of us would be in jail.
Yep.
Every
I've
single
thought about
one.
robbing banks, but I haven't robbed a bank.
Yeah. I've thought about ramming my car into a few people who've cut me off or something like that. So,
man, let me tell you, if you ever come to Charlotte, like it's crazy. The drivers here are nuts. If you're going in a fast lane, it can be like 60 miles an hour out. And so I'm a fast driver, you guys. I'll be going 80 in a 60, and people will blow past me going like 110. It's great, and that's normal for it down here. It's crazy.
That's fun. There's questions about if NOCD offers therapy more catered to religious beliefs, not so much spiritual. Absolutely. I mean, we look at scrupulosity according to all of those types of things, and some of our therapists have been willing to identify how they approach that. So call us, and we'd be more than happy to work with your ability to see what we can do for you.
Yeah.
That one we kind of addressed already. It's a kind of a basic on another way. Again, this is a good one, and probably our last one. But since you do our scrupulosity group, this is an interesting one. I have a chronic guilt for weeks on end for a specific religious existential OCD thought. I've had much success treating other obsessions, but this one sticks very much. Any tips or advice?
Hold on, let me read it. So like I have questions.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes with just this to get just a couple of sentences.
Yeah, a little snapshot. So yeah, I have so many questions. Like,
well, I'll start off with another, if you don't mind. Why do we have to have guilt about a thought?
Yeah,
I mean, here's the problem that we see. There's this notion all the time that every thought is volitional and wanted. Why would I have a thought unless I wanted it or I made it happen? The reality is random crap pops into our heads all the time. All the time.
All day long.
So,
all day long.
I mean, Monique, I know we've been doing this and we've been chatting with each other, but I have had thoughts like, what will I have for dinner after this? Pop in my head in the middle of our conversation, right? It has happened. It has.
I was thinking about like the trip that I'm taking to Africa because I saw this little
there you go.
Africa thing.
Yeah. So
even bad thoughts that pop into our head, right? Like I tell people,
quote unquote bad thoughts, because I contend there's no such thing as a bad thought. Yeah.
Big facts. Right. I tell people also, I was like, so when we have the wide array of thoughts, like we probably have 10,000 thoughts a day,
at least.
So what makes this one so different and so special? Like, why have we stopped here? Right? What about this became the Jack in the Box moment? Because if every other thought just gets to be a thought, why does this thought get to be special, right? Why does this thought get to be something that we need to address and we need to figure out and we need to right, apologize for, do like rituals with, right?
Absolutely.
When we do have guilt, right, over the thoughts that we have, it's really important for us to recognize that like our OCD can make us feel guilty over anything.
You got that right.
And it has just, right, this is just another stop on the train. And being able to like recognize and tell yourself that like, I'm going to just put this aside, right? I don't need to know if God is mad at me about this. I don't need to know if this is going to change how anything with my religion happens. Sometimes, right, like I don't need to know is just the best thing that we can do for ourselves. Of a nice little shoulder shrug.
Yeah. Finally, just because to round out what we started talking with, yes, there is disparities in education and understanding of triggers in African Americans and African American males, females. I appreciate any member or client who wants to help to educate their therapist on cultural differences so that that therapy can be designed to be as excellent as possible. And Monique, I want to thank you for being one of our African American therapists here at NOCD who has helped us to learn more about culture and biases and stereotypes and help us on the education that we need to, because as you know, for us as a company, we're an amazingly diverse company. Number one, just culturally, religiously, people with OCD who work for us as well too. I am proud of what we have here at this company, but I know that there's always chances for us to improve and learn and grow. And thank you for being with us tonight to represent what we do here at NOCD and the work that you've done with the members that you've worked with. I really appreciate it, and I know your members have as well too. So.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure to come on and chat with you guys and kind of answer some questions. So yeah, I love it. It's been a very nice ride at OCD, because I started this job because I had done exposure therapy for a snake phobia like years ago. And once I saw it, I was like, oh, I know. I was like, I live this. I know this works. I know this is helpful, right? Like I know, because like, you know, I went through it, and it really does, like, it changes the way you see your own life. It changes the way that you move through life. It really is so helpful once you start getting into the groove of your own ERP, and like as you start to process through and get to like the other side of things, like it's a much healthier, calmer way of life that feels really, really good.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it. It's great to have you here. Once again, check us out at nocd.com. Download our app at Google Play or iOS. Everyone, have a great evening. Paul Melia on our theme song, taking us out of Ireland. We appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, y'all.